Thank you very much. Good morning, everyone. I am PriyaVijayarajendran, and I'm a Vice President for Data and Artificial Intelligence Business in Microsoft. I'm super excited to be part of this fantastic event, Data Ops Unleashed. It's just a fascinating topic for all of us to come together virtually, at least in this pandemic situation, to come and talk about this very important topic, which is all about taking advantage of our data. And that's why my session is titled appropriately as Modernizing Your Data Estate. In Microsoft, we refer commonly as data estate because data has grown into multiple dimensions over a period of time, and there is not a pattern of data. So we refer, and Microsoft has been a provider of data technologies all the way from on-premise. We've been a SQL Server company for decades, actually. And so we've been on a journey with our customers right from their on-premise, the legacy footprint, now going into open source databases and globally distributed databases like Cosmos DB as an example. But importantly, converging all this data, breaking the data silos and helping customers to digitally transform by modernizing, getting onto cloud with the data estate through analytics. So, which is what I'm going to share with you all today with the data ops lens today. So excited to get started. So data as a strategic asset, in fact, you've heard Satya, our CEO, talk about 2020 as a year taught us many things, not just that, how companies have come back and rebooted themselves, their businesses, especially in this pandemic world, but also how data has transformed itself to be a strategic asset. A lot of companies who wanted it to do this for IT reasons, they started to see data as a strategic asset. Managing and maintaining data is not a liability anymore. Many of you who are in this business as engineers, as data engineers, DevOps experts, full stack developers, data scientists, and even business architects who's been trying to, enterprise architect who's been trying to connect the dots in your complex enterprise landscapes. You all start to see data as a true strategic asset, just simply because it's not just a liability to manage and optimize as an IT object, but more of something of strategic value to customers. A simple example is when a supply and demand situation hit many enterprises so hard during the situation, data really helped them, companies, to really understand where should they focus right now, what is the immediate problem they should be solving, and not just solving things, to really understand, is it really working, are they making an impact, what they have a business have to do. So this message has been resonating very well. So why is it relevant for all of us? Because all those things, what we always aspire to do as data technology practitioners, started to spring forward. I've never been, this is almost my 25th year in this industry, and so many companies are starting on a data journey. They are looking for data strategy, data platform architectures, and they are trying to make sense out of their data landscape. So we all are getting busy, actually. So moving on to this, this means many things for many of us, right? For a CIO or a CDO, when I talk about is, yeah, they do understand the volume, variety, and velocity problem. But more as a double-clicked version for all of us here is, when I talk about volume, we as data technologists, we think about is it real time? Is it a batch? Is it coming from the systems of record, from an enterprise source? And volume correlates to the source of the data, right? Because it varies from gigabytes to terabytes to petabytes and exabytes. What are some of the market signals that we are getting? So volume has characteristics to the type of data and the characteristics of the data as well. again, the variety and the velocity offers different complexities, because that's where, as data operational colleagues, we talk about what is the agility that we need to bring into the systems, right? Because what is the consistency and the framework that we can offer here. So, and then the variety is also on give us challenges in terms of what type of data architecture we have done. So we all have gone into the traditional data warehouses type of patterns, and now there are workloads which is very prime for Spark type of computing, and there are things which is very relational in nature, just the way that the call logs as examples, as T logs, transactional logs in a retail environment as an example, or a high risk trading platform from banking. So volume, variety, and velocity from a data lens means many things for us when we are looking at the data architecture. So and also importantly, it throws real world challenges like, is it trustworthy? Am I operating the data at a right security level? Am I allowing data not just faster, agile, and be able to have operational consistency is the goal? Is my architecture able to withstand the multitude of this 3V's dimension, but also am I operating it in a very safely governed and secure environment, right? What's the exposure of it? Because, mistakes do happen in such environments. So this is where we as Microsoft, we put a lot of effort. Our products, you must have heard about Purview, which is truly a multi-cloud single pane of glass for all things on data. I talked about data estate, which is all the way from on-premise to cloud native operational applications, to open source applications and analytical applications. How do you have a single pane of view? So this is all in that direction to make sure not only we operate data with agility, but we operate data in a very centralized governance, but yet having the operational agility that we need. Now let's get to the meat of it, right? What do we want to discuss today? Again, I'm encouraging all of us to look at this slide, which we all have seen many times, actually. We all know the ingest and digest. We all know the processing engines that we need. And again, I've taken the liberty of outlining some of the, the typical Microsoft architectures that we see in a modern data warehouse pattern. You will see our first-party product, Azure Databricks, as an example, and especially relevant for all things which we do on Spark, and our HT Insight, that is another first-party product that we use. Sometimes data directly travels to Synapse, which is very powerful for lightweight Spark workloads, as well as relational or Parquet formats. So you can mix and match the combination. But predominantly, I wanted to talk about, can we all get on the same page of what is the real problem that we all are trying to solve, right? What do the companies have? So the first one, on the leftmost extreme side, you see the typical sources, right? Like you take any mature enterprise organization. I'm not talking about the prototype type of environments, right? The quick tryouts. I'm talking about a mature enterprise organization. The left extreme side, it shows the different sources and systems that we have. So the problem statement one is, when we design a data ops mature organization, we want an ability to collect the data from these different sources and systems and platforms, if you will, right? Then the second thing is, imagine that if you had to create this piping and operational agility, then you need pretty much infrastructure as a code, the type of a concept, right? Deploy the new development and staging, the testing environments in an automated way. The human effort of just recreating this over and over and over without kind of a template, this is pretty exhausting for all of us. And like I said, the data architectures could be very nuanced, going back to my volume variety problem, because sometimes we have a data lake type of construct. Sometimes we have a classic data warehouse type of a thing. So these days we talk about a delta lake type of a concept as well. Now, with that agility of data needs, end of the day, we all want to do, we all want to prep data so ready so that either it's a BI or is it an AI can actually leverage by building models or by building reports so agile. So now we talked about infrastructure as a code, where you create a template and you deploy it. What is the third problem which we typically face is the deploy the changes, right? As you go through this, and how do you deploy the changes? That's our classic CI/CD type of issue. Implement continuous integration, continuous delivery across the pipeline, and pretty much. Largely governed organizations, they also expect some kind of deployment gates, if you will, right? When you're really thinking about in production. Then the third one is pipeline. Pipeline as a code, pipeline as a template, because pipeline definitions, it's super important. I'll talk about data factory, Azure Data Factory as a concept. How did it come? Because that's our thinking. You need to almost create a robustness and democratize this over and over, because it is a lot of work. And we will talk enough about the agility, because analytics by nature itself is going to be so dynamic, because today the set of data that you're bringing together for what you're analyzing or what you're building as a machine learning model could absolutely change within 24 hours, just by the nature of what the data tells you or what the signals are, or if your model is overfitting, or if there is a bias, etc. There could be many reasons, both statistically or by business needs, that there is agility in the data world already by itself, right? And the interesting aspect, which I'll talk about, it is the data pipeline should carry out the data validation. So it's not just about the agility and the process and the tooling part of it, but also the validation part of it, that how we want to differentiate, right? And support monitoring. This is where I just love Unravel as a partner with us, is having this view of what is out there. How am I optimizing my resources, right? Am I getting alert? Because what kind of automated alerts that you can have, so that you can use your resources much optimally. And so that's super important, the support monitoring. And of course, I talked about security from a storage perspective, the centralized configuration. So I've just kind of summarized some of the problem statements that we are dealing with. It's not just enough to say, yeah, this is kind of the 4 steps in plumbing the data throughout, but it's more of what are the classic problems that we face, especially from a data ops lens. So what are the consequences of these issues, right? As practitioners, but how do the CIOs and CXOs see this problem? Because 1A, the value is super hard to demonstrate. Only interesting stats is only 27% of the CXOs consider their big data projects as valuable, because they're not able to see the value, because we end up spending time on many other things. As much we spend the time on data engineering, we don't create a value out of the data insights part of it, right? Second things, it's a daunting thing, right? It takes about, I used to be part of SAP, and SAP implementations usually typically take longer, because it's a lot of change management. And especially for a technology, a data technology, which is with a lot of people and skilled people available, but yet the implementation is super long. So the stat says it's estimated that it takes about 12 to 18 months to design and deploy, all the way through till then AI project is kind of happening in live, right? That's way too long. I'm comparing this to a typical enterprise system implementation, like an SAP system, right? Projects rarely go into the production, because I talked about it. Hey, we're not talking about something we want to do it in a pilot, because then we can experiment a lot of technology. I'm talking about enterprise grade production systems, and it's a known fact that many projects, especially the pipeline and the DevOps consistency leading to a real maturity AI in a company, they rarely get onto production. It's said that only 50% of the actual trials of AI gets into production project, because simply of this complexity. So I think I've spent quite some time on anchoring all of us on what is the problem statement, right? And as a tribe, let's talk about the dawn of data ops and how it's changing kind of the mindset, and how data engineering is evolving to embrace data ops. And again, sometimes I loosely also hear, hey, data ops is not just, it's a fancy way of saying DevOps for data. Some folks who are in the weeds of it, we can meticulously point the subtle difference between, it's not just doing things agile, it's not just bringing the development and operational agility through DevOps. And the validation point, which I talked about, which is the SPC, which is the third bullet I talk about. So what is data ops, right? The genesis of the data ops. So data ops, as a practice, fundamentally is to address the three challenges that we have. One, cohesion between the teams. Today we are with the IT, analytics, and business teams, actually all working in silos, because the IT teams, like I said, they operate data as more as a IT liability or an IT object, so to speak, but the analysts treat data as a fabric in which they're going to build and do things on top of it. And then, of course, the business teams are trying to consume the data, and their approach to data is very different. And how do you bring consistency to them? That's one thing, right? The second thing is the process efficiency part of it. And I talked about, we do a lot more things, but can we get on to the production part of it? So that's the second one. Especially the timing and the budget, because we cannot dilute, the effort which is going on to consolidating the data, and then the budget part of it, and the technology is half-baked. And then also, in my personal journey with working with a lot of enterprise customers, there's a lot of homegrown big data solutions. It lacks a lot of consistency. Best practices is something we always have to learn, regardless it comes from anywhere. But how do we create a common shared understanding of how can be an industry best practice for data ops, right? So that's a second aspect of what we could solve using data ops. Then the third thing is the diversity of technology. The sheer things about a lot of open source frameworks. People, for the sake of solving the problem, we bring in a lot of technology, which might end up being very hard to integrate and maintain, right? That's why of course, what Unravel offers here, which has helped actually in many of the customer stories that I've been, many telcos and Adobe actually as well, where we have jointly went and solved some of the largest HDFS migrations into Azure Databricks, super smooth. And it's mainly to debunk the diversity of technology and to integrate and maintain consistency, right? So, so these are predominantly, in my view, why data ops is super relevant for enterprises, and they are totally embracing this. And I talked about the three aspects: the DevOps, the Agile, and the SPC part. So let's just double clicking on, okay, what was DevOps, right? DevOps was the merging of the typical software development that we had, the development in the old SDLC days, and then the operational aspect of it. We took Dev and Ops and we made it DevOps, and the main goal was, hey, reduce the time to deployment and increase the time to market, decrease, and then minimizes any kind of issues, the bugs, etc., and bring in the resolutions faster, right? So this is typically, and DevOps primarily focused on the continuous integration and the continuous delivery of the software and making sure the IT resources are leveraged properly. So that's a classic definition of DevOps, which is very much needed for data ops, right? So absolutely in there. And agile development is all about, bridging this typical IT of the data side into analytics development and deployment, and understanding the agility of what is very unique about data itself, right? Because the typical software development agility is very different. Breaking this waterfall model, that was important, but data itself, the way we consume things and the way the change is introduced into the data landscape, comes just by the nature it's data itself. So that agility is taken into consideration. Now let's talk about the new thing, which many of you might have heard or might have not have heard, is the SPC part of it, right? What is it is, validation is a critical part of it. Yeah, we can be agile, we can create a CI/CD, but what is the guarantee that it works, right? How are we monitoring it? How are we validating it? How are we, self-correcting some of the things? That's the SPC part of it. And because this is very unique to data, expecting everything to be figured out by a human, it's super hard. So having, a statistical way of controlling this, the data pipeline, and finding anomalies in the data, that is also a critical part of the data ops, right? And so summarizing all of this, what is the intellectual heritage of data ops, right? Agility governs the analytics development. DevOps optimizes the CI/CD and the code aspects, builds and delivery of the new analytics projects. And SPC orchestrates and monitors the data factory approach of it, right? Because that's what I talked about, the data factory, which is about as much we are semantically driving the insights of the data, but also treating it more as a factory approach in terms of finding process control type of aspects and validating and just applying the manufacturing mindset, right? So that's pretty much the intellectual heritage of data ops here. So now I have a interesting slide, which I thought, how does it happen in real? I know, apologies if the slide is kind of tiny here, but it pretty much gives you a picture of how does it come into a real life. This is a data ops double-click version of a real project which was happened. So let me talk about the stages, then I'll encourage you all to eyeball it with the stages, right? In a classic DevOps environment, you of course have sandbox, you have development, and you kind of have a test deploy, and sometimes you have monitor, right? But in this diagram, you should be able to spot out these phases, and I'll just specifically click on CI/CD aspects of things and the monitor aspect of things. You should be able to spot sandbox, obviously, develop, and in the CI part of it, there is two nuances. So orchestrate and then the test part of it, both. And because it's not just about, like I said, the three bubbles that we talked about, that comes with the orchestration. Then after the CI part, it's the CD part, which is the deploy part that you should be able to see. And then comes the orchestration part of it, because that's when we are validating the aspects. And the last one is the monitor part of it, right? So this is how a full-blown live architecture with the data ops environment looks like. As you can see, there is an aspect of SQL Engine, there is an aspect of Databricks in here, and there is Azure Data Factory in here, and you can see how it is staged across the sandbox and the development environment. Many a times, people even branch out even further for the model validation and testing, which can even further branch out. But imagine the power of consistency and the integration such an architecture actually offers. So happy to share it. I know we are not live chatting right now at this point in time. I'm happy to pass on. This is where I always love face-to-face interactions. I'm happy to pass on some references so you can actually try certain things. There is a lot of GitHub templates that we have made available, and I leave you all with some resources as well towards the end. So now, hey, we get all these things as practitioners. Good to know the point of view. But what am I dealing, especially when it comes to Microsoft, right? And I'm just giving you an overlay version of it. So in a typical enterprise data estate architecture, the bottom part, we call them as data publishers, the people from different parts of the business who owns the data, or who are the data generators, so to speak, right? And then you have storage, and you have different compute architectures, right? And we call storage as Azure Data Lake Storage, and our Gen 2 version is super powerful, and it supports many of the data technologies that many of you might be personally working on. So in that, there are a couple of two buckets on this. The middle bucket is what we are going to focus on. Hey, you do have Azure Data Lake, and you do have Synapse, and you do have Azure Databricks as a first party product as well. So we work with customers on any of these things depending on how mature or what data predominantly they deal with, right? And Synapse gives a possibility to converge many of these things. If the customer is like, hey, I have a bit of everything, but I'm not going to be just going with a data lake architecture right now, because not everything is kind of too much unstructured for me, or batch. I have a lot of real-time needs. So we use things like log analytics as an example, and real-time streaming engine. And I have a combination of relational data stores as well as these type of Spark workloads. And I have a huge enterprise where my developers, my data developers, so to speak, are comfortable in SQL, comfortable in Spark, comfortable with Spark technologies, comfortable with R and Python. I want to create a one tool converged experience of handling all things data. So those customers definitely prefer to go Synapse. Synapse is much more interesting in that sense because of the limitless scale possibility, because the storage and the compute can scale limitlessly, just like this. That way, it's a disintegrated architecture which allows for powerful scale just for the classic big data needs, right? Azure Databricks, many customers. So this is the biggest migration that we also extensively work with Unravel as our partner. Is there are many companies, they are like, okay, we knew big data architecture was the most thing, and we all went with our HDFS architecture, but now it's slowing us down. It's expensive. It's not agile enough, and we need to turn around insights like in a faster pace. What do we do? And depending on what the customer's needs are, HT Insights could be one of the destination which you saw in the picture before, or Azure Databricks, because Azure Databricks is our go-to-market, is our preferred go-to approach on handling many of your Spark computing needs, and it works very seamlessly with Synapse as well in terms of extending it to much more of the power of cloud-native data warehouse needs as well. So I'm just giving you a teaser on many of these capabilities because, again, you are powering with, you will be powering with a lot of the underlying data ops to these data layer, actually, data technologies. And Purview pretty much cuts across. So Purview, you can almost map it to the definition of data estate that I talked about. Purview literally is creating a single, so ability to discover data regardless of where it is in your data estate, right? And then catalog them smartly, allowing to identify the master data objects and identify what data needs to be even transformed or loaded into the other side of the things. And then how do you govern this data, the policy, applying policy controls and authorizations and user access management and all of it, of course, supporting already the existing ones at a database level as well, right? And the interesting thing about Purview is truly a multi-cloud product as well, because Purview not only works with all things on Azure, it can also read your on-prem, it can also read things which is running on AWS as well, and it can also read things which is running on Google Cloud as well. So that way, it's a truly multi-cloud product to have a single pane of use. It's kind of a the data governance dream to be able to go to one place where you can see the complete landscape of your data, right? And data mesh as a technology, as an architecture paradigm, it's resonating very well to these customers, because they are like, oh, do I create an IT silo? Do I have to replicate what we do in one team in 10 teams? But we don't want to slow down in bringing all the data into one place where, governance feels very restricting people what they can do with data, it's actually the reverse. Governance should allow people to do more, but yet how do you not duplicate things? We always talk about, hey, break the silos of data, but we are also mindful about don't replicate the data in 10 other places if you don't need to, right? So purview pretty much is in that, in aspiration towards that, is people get the power of centralized governance, but yet they have the agility to do things which is relevant for their business unit or for their side of the IT operations. Like finance, they do something, marketing and operations, they do something, and the sales teams, they do something, right? And based on what data they have. So that's why if you can overlay the concept of data mesh, it resonates super very well. And now, who are the people who consume all this beautiful things that we offer up until this point? Of course, Synapse, because Synapse is also an editor where you can query, you can get quick insights, etc. Then Azure Machine Learning, artificial intelligence, because, like I said, this is super integrated with Synapse, that you can actually create your environment to create your models, validate, train your models, test your models, and then deploy as well. We talk about data ops today. Data ops just extends all the way to the ML DevOps as well, because ML DevOps has a specific nuance of actually creating model, creating this environment where you can validate, continuous training, and then revalidating the trainings aspect of things as well. And again, Databricks as one more source, and the Power Platform technologies, you must have heard of them. So either you create a low code or a no code applications using this data, which is kind of what, as full stack developers, many of us appreciate, or the Power BI, the business users can actually generate reporting leveraging the Power Platform capabilities, Power BI actually. The fascinating thing about is how much it's democratized as, right? Data technologies are super cool, but yet if you really think about it as a goal, the time it takes for somebody to really build a report and to see what's going on in their business really takes months, right? In a typical and an average setup, and that's not okay actually. So we should be able to get the data from source, avoid the time it takes so long to even travel through this complicated layer, and allow the business user, in this case a BI user who's leveraging tools such as Power BI, it could be like ThoughtSpot, Tableau, you name, pretty much any of the BI layer, to instantly turn on. So that's what Synapse solves it at level 1, but it also extends a true native stack all the way till Power BI as well. The last one is the business applications, because these days every application is data driven. Every application has to be intelligent, baked in with AI, either by a statistical way of mining the data and making smarter decisions as part of the business applications, or applications being wired with rich cognitive experiences like speech to text or visual recognition. Like, when you have a receipt or some kind of an invoice, it recognizes the forms and it automates things, and there is a process optimization part of it. So every business applications is powered through data, and all that we talked about so far is kind of feeding back into the business applications we have. In Microsoft, we call it as our Dynamics business, or BizApps, as generally we call it. There is a particular example, I've put it here. It's called Dynamics solution called Customer Insights, right? We all have done this Customer 360, which is bringing customer data from many different parts of our organization, dedupe them, create a master customer record, apply all the pipeline and other things, and then create some kind of a master way of sharing this across the different parts of the organization. As you can imagine, every part of the organization uses customer data. So how you can optimize this? I think this is practically the use case which is solved by every enterprise, B2B or B2C actually. So we do have a product called Customer Insights, and it fundamentally uses this stack that I'm just talking about. Now, A lot, right? Of course, I've just given you a teaser of it. I'm happy to share the slide so you can go and check out uh, all this architecture components that I just shared. And I think, yeah, pretty much I talked about Gen 2, Synapse, Data Factory, and Event Tabs, which is the real-time engine. I talked about Databricks and Stream Analytics and Power BI. So help yourself. There's a lot of self-learning capabilities and technical documentation. And any of you have some questions, feel free to reach us as well. So how can you get started? Because this community of people, all of us, we are about keeping it real. And I was wondering, what can I share with you all actually towards the end of it, right? And maybe hear from you all, either in LinkedIn or through, contacting us, any of us here in my team in Microsoft. As you've been experiencing these technologies as well, or sharing some of the best practices even, right? Of course, there is a lot of free training on the data ops side from Microsoft. We do have Azure pipelines, CI/CD, a lot of product capabilities which comes as part of it. And we also work with partners like Unravel, who have helped tremendously with our HDFS, the Spark migration workloads with many customers, and it's still growing. Like I said, there's a strong demand right now to bring some data consents in every organization so that they can serve their businesses better. So if some of you are a visual person like me, there is a lot of video center, which is almost like mimicking a classroom experience. There is a video center for experiencing these technologies. We do conduct a lot of events. In this case, many of them are virtual at this point in time, which is fundamentally on bringing practitioners together just to get a common mind share, what's happening, how can we give you some kind of a sandbox environment for you to just play with the technology. So those are the events. Look out for them, and you can register. They're free for pretty much all of it. Or if you are an enterprise and you really want your organization just to experience, hey, what is it? I really want my team to go through it. We'll be super happy to not just do the event, but also what we do as like hackathon, right? Like just share the technology, bring on board colleagues both from Microsoft, sometimes from partners and from our customers as well, get together and solve a real problem. And that way we can validate many of the things as well. We call them as open hacks, actually. And the last one, webinars, a lot more possibility to continue to learn. And I think these links directly take you to the data ops and the DevOps and some of the specific, not just the data technology, but also the tooling behind it. I'm at the top of my hour. Though I'm not seeing many of you in person, I hope it was helpful. And there's a fantastic lineup of sessions for the rest of the day from the organizers where you're going to hear from a lot of practitioners from a lot of companies who have taken data ops and made it their own. And I look forward to hearing from some of you. Back to the team.